Today, we are going to the 19th century to sit back as we go to Ireland. Philip Henry Cross was born in 1823 in Shandy Hall, which is a large house near the small village of Coachford in the south of Ireland, about 15 miles west of the city of Cork. He was the eldest of 5 children. He did very well at school and went on to study medicine at the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin. In 1848, soon after he graduated, he joined the British Army and worked his way up to the rank of Surgeon Major with the 53rd Regiment. During the 1850s, he served in military conflicts, including the Crimean War. On the 17th of August 1869, when Philip was 46 years old, he married Laura Marriott. She was born in 1840 and was the only surviving child of Richard Marriott, an English gentleman from the county of Essex. Laura's father did not approve of the marriage to Philip. This may have been because he was 17 years older than his daughter, or maybe because he knew that an army doctor would often be called away for long periods of time, and he would rarely see Laura, his only surviving child. Not long after they married, Philip's regiment was sent to Canada, so accompanied by his new wife, Philip sailed across the Atlantic to take up his new position. The regiment stayed in Canada for the next 5 years, and Laura's father's concerns about not seeing his daughter were correct, as in 1874, while she was living overseas, he died. Following his death, Philip inherited his wife's father's estate, which was worth about £5,000. They returned to London in 1875, along with 3 children, and went to live in the fashionable area of Notting Hill, and here their 4th child was born. The following year, in 1876, Philip's father died, and he inherited the family property of Shandy Hall, together with its 500-acre farm. Philip, now 53 years old, decided to retire from the British Army, and the family went back to Philip's childhood home, where in 1877, child number 5 was born. Philip spent his time looking after the house and the 500-acre farm. He also developed a passion for hunting and would hunt whenever he was able to. When one of the neighbouring farmers asked him not to hunt over his land, Philip suddenly went into a rage and hit the neighbour so hard that his ear fell off. In the subsequent court case, Philip was ordered to pay his unfortunate neighbour £200 in damages and was also banned from hunting. His violent actions also meant that the police had become aware of him and decided that they needed to keep their eye on Dr. Philip Cross. Some people thought that Philip's rage was due to the fact that he was worried about his wife. Life in the quiet Irish village was very different to the life Laura had been used to in Essex and in London. Even though she had housemaids and cooks, she didn't have many friends and suffered from ill health. She would often stay in the house all day and become anxious and depressed. In the summer of 1886, Laura left her home at Shandy Hall to visit her aunts and cousins back where she grew up in the county of Essex. Everyone was hoping that she would return to Ireland, refreshed and in better health. Close to Philip and Laura lived John Caulfield, a retired army captain, and his wife Teresa. About the same time that Laura went on her extended vacation to Essex, the Caulfields employed a governess for their children, named Effie Forbes Skinner. She was young, pretty and impressionable, and on meeting her for the first time, and despite being over 40 years her senior, Philip was immediately attracted to her. Effie had had an interesting upbringing. She was born in Scotland, but had spent much of her childhood in Germany and Switzerland, where her father had worked as a church minister. Her new job as a governess was a great adventure for the young lady, and it was the first time she had ever been to Ireland. In the autumn of October 1886, Effie informed her mistress, Mrs. Caulfield, that she would be leaving her employment after Christmas. But Mrs. Caulfield thought it best that she left sooner and gave her a month's notice. 1 month later, however, when she was walking out of a Coalfields house for the last time, the household was shocked, as instead of heading for Dublin, then on to Scotland, as everyone had presumed she would, the young governess travelled 2 miles down the road and started working as governess for the children of Mr. and Mrs. Cross at Shandy Hall. Philip was totally infatuated with the young lady, and surprisingly, Effie seemed to reciprocate his feelings for her. Rumours among the staff soon started, suggesting that the governess was more than just a teacher to 2 of the Cross's children. Laura Cross kept her eye on the pretty, confident and energetic newcomer, and when she thought that she was getting a bit too friendly with her husband, she dismissed her. She said she would give her a good reference and enough money to get to Scotland. So Effie, with trunk in hand, left on the train to Dublin. Philip was very angry that Laura had dismissed his children's governess and started to be irritable and aggressive. His relationship with his wife had not been good for a number of years, but Laura had always tolerated her husband's irrational behaviour. But this time the nature of his attitude towards her surprised everyone who worked at the house and friends who came to visit. On the 28th of March 1887, Philip travelled to Dublin to meet up with Effie. He did not tell anyone where he was going or when he would be back, and he did not return to Shandy Hall until the 22nd of April. On his return, he just started to get on with his usual daily business, without explaining to his wife or anyone else where he had been. The following week, an old school friend of Laura's, named Miss Jefferson, came to stay. She knew that Laura was a lady of delicate health, but was surprised to see her in such a poorly state. During her stay, Laura became increasingly unwell. By the middle of May 1887, Laura was confined to her bed. Her husband tended to her and administered her medication, and if any friends called to see if Laura's condition had improved, they would always be told that the mistress of the house was too poorly to receive visitors. Laura was experiencing stomach pains, vomiting, dizziness, and felt very weak. Staff were put on call to attend her during the night to help ease her pain. Philip continued to stay with her in the same room, but did not seem concerned at the immense suffering of his wife. On the 1st of July 1887, Philip poured Laura a glass of brandy to help her sleep. But this remedy only made Laura feel worse, and she lay with her hands on her stomach, groaning with pain. That night, staff were not called to attend her, and in the early hours of the morning, the groaning stopped, and the bedroom was quiet. At first light, Philip addressed the staff and gave them the sad news that the mistress, Laura Cross, had passed away during the night. Dr. Cross then registered his wife's death as death from typhoid. Within 24 hours, Laura was buried, and the next day, Philip left for England to give the news about his wife's death to her friends and family. While in London, he paid a visit to the church that he had married his wife in all those years earlier. The visit, however, wasn't a nostalgic reminder of happier times. He came to the church to get married to his ex-governess, Effie Forbes Skinner. After the ceremony, he made his way back to his house in Ireland and presented the new mistress of the house to his staff. Everyone was in complete shock, as it was only a few weeks since Laura had died in such agony. Unbeknown to the good doctor, that during his absence, rumours had started to circulate regarding the circumstances surrounding Laura's death. His anger when the governess was dismissed, his disappearance for a month without explanation, and the somewhat drawn-out and painful death of Mrs. Cross. The police also remembered Philip's violent attack on his neighbour. The police were a bit confused, as they figured that no guilty man would draw so much attention to himself as to poison his wife, and then, within 1 month, return to the marital home with a new, young bride. The authorities decided that they needed to be certain, so ordered an exhumation of Laura's body. On examining it, pathologists found traces of arsenic in her stomach, liver, kidney and spleen. They also found traces of strychnine. Dr. Philip Cross was arrested and sent to jail, awaiting trial. The trial date was set for December the 14th, 1887, and it soon became apparent as to why the doctor had married Effie so quickly, as the young lady was heavily pregnant. In court, Philip was confident throughout the trial, which took place in the city of Cork. It seemed strange to most that he portrayed such a cool persona, as the evidence against him was strong. The expert medical witnesses also stated that there was no evidence of typhoid in Laura's body, but Philip was confident he would be acquitted, so much so that he had arranged for friends to come and dine with him at Shandy Hall after the verdict, and had ordered his horse and trap to be ready to take him home from the court when the trial had ended. His confidence of an acquittal was ill-judged, as it took the jury just an hour to find him guilty of murder, and the judge sentenced him to hang. On the 23rd of December, 1887, Effie gave birth to a baby boy named John Cross. Philip appealed the verdict, but his appeal was rejected, and his sentence was carried out on the 10th of January, 1888. Effie returned to England and remarried 10 years later in 1898 and had a daughter. Her son was married in 1909. Effie spent her final years in the Kent seaside town of Westgate-on-Sea, where she died on the 30th of July, 1937, aged 72. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As per usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I will see you in the next brief case.